Before we get to the show, I want to let you know about the Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop, now taking registrations. If you sometimes struggle to find good deer, sometimes struggle to seal the deal, or are a good hunter already but need those critical last few pieces of the puzzle, our workshop's for you. This 2-day experience gives hunters the tools and mindsets needed to be consistent on the best deer where they hunt. Sign up below for a whitetail educational experience you won't forget. The Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop. And now, let's get to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Deer IQ Podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're continuing our series on land and food strategies, how to best set up your land for whitetail success. In this episode, I'm with Neil Hauger, who is a landman. He specializes in finding hunting properties and making them not only good for hunting, but also very profitable. This episode will resonate with anyone that has thought about buying their own hunting land, but maybe isn't sure if they can afford that. And also for people curious about how to make their land potentially worth much more money to sell. And we have a free journal you can download and follow along with this episode and all our other high IQ episodes that will really help you absorb all this great information. You can find that below. Okay, so here are the top things to look for in this episode. How does Neil say anyone can get into owning their own land without much money? Why should you consider looking at hunting land as more of an investment than a hunting property? What are his 5 key things to look for when searching for the perfect hunting investment property? What is his rule of 3 when it comes to establishing land diversity? What is a 1031 exchange and how can it be used to get better and better properties without getting hammered by capital gains tax? And there's a lot more in there as usual, so let's get to the podcast and up your Deer IQ. Okay, I'm here with Neil Hauger. Neil, welcome to the Deer IQ podcast.
Yeah, Adam. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Great to have you on, and we're in a series now. We're looking at land acquisition strategies, and really the series is land and food strategies. And we're going to look at today Neil has an expertise in this area. And before we jump into our talk today and our questions, Neil, why don't you give us a little background about what you do and where your expertise is? This just gives people a little bit of knowledge about where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, expertise, I hope I don't disappoint you, but
No.
I work for Whitetail Properties Real Estate, and I have for about 10 years. I'm in my 10th year right now, and I started after a career of medical device sales and management, and I'm a landowner and I'm a land manager, and I kind of came up through hard knocks of learning, the land management side of it because I own my own properties. I started buying and selling, and to shorten up the story, I found Whitetail Properties like a lot of people do online. I called them up, and next thing you know, I was working for them. So I've been doing it full time in Wisconsin, Northwest Wisconsin. In my territory, I originally had 13 counties, but now I have about 7. And my expertise, I guess, is buying, managing, and then selling property and helping my clients do the same. And I personally do it. So I have a podcast that I talk about this on. It's called the American Landman Podcast, Buying, Managing, and Selling American Land. And I YouTube about the same thing. And I just started putting out a lot of videos, a lot of audio, just a lot of content about those 3 topics, but really a focus on wealth building, like generational wealth building. Because guys, even I included, guys didn't realize that you could really create wealth and hunt and have land and do all the fun stuff, but create generational wealth by doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot more than just a place to hunt, right? And the thing now is that we're seeing across the country, and maybe we can get to this later, this idea, but it seems like there's a shift now and has been for maybe the last, decade or so, where guys are having a hard time finding places to hunt, and it's either I can afford to lease or buy. Maybe I'm lucky and have permission, but that's a lot harder to come by, it seems like. So a lot of guys are forced into hunting public land, and so there's a huge influx and interest there now. And then there's the other side of, okay, how can I get access to private land? And so maybe we start there. You're the land man, you're the land expert, right? So for a beginner or maybe a guy that's looking to try to find private land to hunt, if we're 100% honest, yeah, there's a challenge and fun side of public land hunting, but I think it's almost 90% of deer are taken on private. It is the best hunting, right? So if I'm a beginner trying to get into it, whether it be permission or leasing or even buying, how does one start to go about that? What would you advice you give to guys looking to do that?
Yeah. We could do an entire podcast on just that question.
I'll bet.
But I'll try to pick a couple directions and we'll see where it goes. But there's nothing wrong with hunting public land. And there are areas and pockets where you don't need any money. And that's a beautiful thing about being an American is we have a ton of private land. And typically, if you just get off the road by a quarter mile, you probably leave most guys behind. But what I talk about and the people that come to me is I want to own the land. So leasing is a different aspect. So let's talk about the owning and getting some land, private land to hunt on. To get there, honestly, I think it's as simple as getting out, targeting an area, be somewhat organized. So let's say Polk County, Wisconsin is my favorite county where my farm is. And doing a little research if you want to be organized, where are the Pope and Young bucks coming from? Go to the sports shops in the area, just ask around and try to get a feel. What does it feel like here? Where are the sweet spots, the little pockets of good habitat where it's got a reputation for putting out some big bucks? Because almost every county has a little spot that the insiders know. So if if I use a phrase from biggerpockets.com, driving for dollars, it's almost like driving for bucks. Get out, talk to the sports show people, talk to the sports shop people, talk to the gas stations, just get out and start mixing with people. And you will start to get a feel. And then once you narrow down, put the word out. I've seen anything from a flyer in a gas station where a guy says, I'm looking to lease some land, to Facebook. This morning, I was on Facebook on hunting land in Wisconsin for sale. I talked to Base Camp Realty agent who's a follower of mine, and we had a great conversation. We started talking about little pockets of habitat in a county where he has a listing, to sending letters. There's software, I have land ID software, and I can go on that. It's a subscription, but I can download lists of landowners targeting land that I know I can afford, maybe 20 acres and above, maybe 40 acres and above. I can create a list, and maybe I filter that for just out-of-staters. And I send them guys a letter and say, hey, I'm interested in leasing your land or perhaps buying your land. Or if you can't afford either, I'd like to hunt your land and I'm willing to keep it up, and I'll clean it up and I'll mow your trails in exchange. So I think if you put a little elbow grease into it and use some technology, you can find some places to go.
So maybe first is just trying to figure out where, doing the research as far as what would fit into what you're looking for, right? Your goals. What are your goals? And then also, even before that is knowing, what can you afford? What would you say I know you're into buying and selling, but what would you say as far as the pros and cons to leasing? A lot of guys do lease. What would you say about that? Pros and cons?
First off, you got to have money to do it, and it ain't getting any cheaper. And depending on the county you're in, there's scarcity and there's the expense. And frankly, you're throwing money to the wind and you're just losing it. But some guys, that's fine. That's the way they want to go. They want to buy their way into some really good hunting. But it can be pulled out from underneath you really quick. And then all of a sudden in September, I lost my lease and I don't have any place to go. And every year I get calls from guys, I got to get a place right now. Do you have any leases? Do you have anything for sale? So leasing is a fine way to go about it. But my mind, I want to create wealth and I want to have something that's mine. So I would suggest, owning. And I've helped a number of guys through my podcast and my YouTube channel to get their first piece of land. And when they call me, I say, how much money do you have? And I've said his name a number of times, and Zach will probably hear this, but I think Zach got in with like $30,000, and he bought a property, maybe even less, because I sold him a property at $77,000. It was just a little 20-acre parcel in Polk County, and I walked him through why this was a good buy. And there's like 5 factors of what I look for in a property. And I won't get into it, but I call it the Fab 5, and I have a YouTube video about that if you want to look it up. One of the things I told him was subdividable, near a travel route, and within an hour of a large metro. And when I found in this spot, I said, you could simply buy this 20-acre parcel, split it down the middle, create 2 10-acre parcels. We'll upgrade a little bit with food plots, clean up all the snarf that was laying around, put a little money into it, water hole, hang some cameras, hang a tree stand, and we could turn around and sell this. So he could have leased, he could have took, $10,000 a year over the next 3 years and leased, and he would have spent the $30,000, but then he had nothing to show for it. Instead, I said, let's buy a small piece, we'll fix it up and we'll flip it. So he bought it for $77,000. He did exactly what I said: food plots, trails, cleaned up all the snarf laying around, had it subdivided, sold 2 10-acre parcels, and we sold that. I got to change the story a little bit, but I'm going to say we sold it for $135,000. So he bought it for $77,000. He put $5,000 into it. He walked away with $130,000 less what he put into it, and he had a chunk of money. But now he had a little bit more money. So then he followed me on my Facebook page, and I put up another one, and it was a good price, and it had a nice little cabin. But it was, a little tired, but he could look past the junk laying around. And he called me, he goes, tell me about that. I said, well, this one, you have enough money down, and here's your payment. And if you could buy this and clean all this stuff up and paint that and put trails there and food plots, I guarantee you I could sell this for $225,000. So he bought that property for like $180,000, and he's working on it right now, and he's thinking about selling it. So he'll move up, and now he's got about $70,000 in his pocket. So instead of spending the money on a lease where he just lost it, that money's gone. Now he has generational wealth creation, and he's got a real asset. So I prefer ownership over leasing every day.
Yeah. So if, for example, I'm trying to figure out, hey, I don't have a lot of money right now. Maybe I do have a little bit, but it's not enough, right? It's the maybe long-term look and maybe a different goal than just having a hunting property. It's okay, almost like investment strategy. Like you see people that house flip and stuff. It's almost what I'm taking from what you're saying is almost like that, right? Like you got to look at it a little more business wise and say, okay, I'm not gonna lease for 5 years. Let's say I'm gonna squirrel away some money. I'm gonna, kind of hunt some public land maybe in that time. I'm gonna, pay my dues on this end and scrimp a little bit, but then I can invest and buy a small property, right? That's where I start. And I can just start hopping my way up, stair-stepping my way up, like your example there, until I get to a place where what I want, my eventual goal, right? And maybe you just baby step it like that.
Yeah.
Is a much better way to look at it. And I think for me, and I'm kind of in that boat, as I would assume a lot of guys, either you have a lot of money and you can just go buy it, but most people are probably like, in my boat, right? Middle class maybe, and you're trying to figure out how can I ever own some land? And maybe that's the mentality, right? Just start small and work your way up, and that's more feasible. It seems like something I can do.
I want to address something you just said.
Yeah.
Owning land or achieving anything in life, a lot of it's right here. It's all in your head. And you said something that I've said to other people, and I'm going to say what you said. How can I ever afford this? That's where most guys stop. How could I ever afford this?
Right.
And I say, okay, the same words, different emphasis. Not how can I ever afford this? The question is, how can I afford this? It's a question, and it's a mindset that says, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to answer that question. How can I afford this? And the answer is, well, let's start with that. What do you have to work with? I've got $5,000. I got 1,000. Okay. Can you take $1,000 and go on Facebook and this is exactly what Zach did. Can you find a trailer that you buy for $1,000 that's all dirty and power wash it and rewire it and put it back on the market and sell it for $2,500 and make $1,500? Yes, that's how you can afford this. You just did something. Can you take that $2,500 and buy a 15-foot enclosed trailer and do it again and take that $2,500 and turn it into $5,000? Yes, you can. That's how you can do this. And he walked his way up. And I talked to so many guys that they have this defeatist attitude that land is for the rich guy. Oh, it's easy for you to say that, Neil. You work for Whitetail Properties Real Estate, and I see how much you sell. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't always do that. I didn't. I started off with $100,000 property in Ashland, Wisconsin, and people said, why would you ever buy land way up there? And I said, because that's the only land I can afford. But I bought it and I improved on it, and I ended up selling it to Enbridge Energy for $385,000. And guess what? Boom. And then I went to my next farm and I rolled it over, and I used strategies like a 1031 exchange. So again, how can I afford this? Well, get smart about money management, use a 1031 exchange, roll it over. And that's what Zach is doing. He's rolling it over and rolling it over. So instead of like the defeatist attitudes, like, how can I afford this? He came to me or guys like me and said, how can I do this? Like, tell me the steps.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Real quick, I know you said there's 5 factors, but can you, maybe real quick go through what are those, like what should I look for if I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I think I can at least get in the game here, right?
Yeah.
I've looked at that. And then you mentioned what was it, 1031? Could you just tell us what that is and maybe go over, okay, this is what I should be looking for?
All right.
Okay, so if you like this episode so far, please do a couple things for me. First, give this a like if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening on a podcast platform, rate it and review it, and share it with a friend who may benefit. That really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate it. And here is your high IQ moment. Many people do not think of their hunting land, their little piece of heaven, similar to a stock or mutual fund type investment. That's fine, and I don't know if I personally will ever do land flipping. However, consider this. Even if you don't, the more you look at land as something to invest in to increase its value to a potential buyer, the more actual value it will gain for you. Work at habitat improvements, road and trail systems, and anything to increase its curb appeal, and I think you won't regret it. And who knows, someday you may wish to sell and you'll have done the work needed to get the most out of it already. That's a high IQ way to look at land and something to think about. And I have a free resource for you which fits with this series on land and food strategies. It's the Land Management Starter Kit, which goes through the 4 big questions every landowner must ask to set up their property for success. You can download that below, and it will really help you get off on the right foot, which is super important, or help you get back on the right track for whitetail success, managing your specific property. All right, and now back to the podcast.
The 5 factors, okay? And I might even be able to expand this, but I tried to boil it down to 5 things that I always look for when, as like my first level of filter on a property. Number 1 is I want it, and these are not necessarily in order, so I'll have to see if I can remember to do this. Number 1, I want it to be on a geographic travel corridor. So look at any city USA, you'll see a network of freeways going in that city, and then from that city you'll see the spider web of roads that lead out of the city. Those are the geographic travel corridors. That's where most people travel and as development happens in that small town, you're going to get a gas station at the first exit, and then a couple houses and buildings, and then they start growing. And then when that fills out, it's the next, they go a little bit further out that freeway to the next exit, and they do the same. That's the geographic travel. That's where development happens. Anytime you find land on that corridor, it's going to be more valuable. So you just want to know where the direction is going. Number two is you want a demographic growth corridor. And the travel corridors and growth corridors, as I just said, are one and the same. That's where the most valuable land is happening, and it's growing in value. So if you can get outside of the city a little bit, you can pick up the cheaper land. And the 30 minutes, this is number three, 30 minutes or less is the key highest dollar, greatest value, greatest opportunity for growth level, 30 minutes. If you get to an hour, anything within an hour is pretty good, because a lot of guys will drop the suit and head to the cabin and they don't mind traveling an hour. That's okay. I would say 2 hours is the max. By 2 hours, your butt's sore, your kids are crying, the wife is complaining, and it just, you can't just, you don't feel like you could just jump up there and for an evening sit.
Yeah.
So those are three. Number four is on that travel route, like a county highway, be 3 to 5 miles off of that travel route. Because as soon as you turn the corner from Highway 35 and get onto County Road E, and you're heading east to my cabin, about a mile, everything calms down. 2 miles, there's not much happening. 3 miles, it's like, I'm here. I'm almost there. Everything calms. You see deer. That's the route. 3 to 5 miles off of the travel route. The last one is diversity, and always think in threes. Food, water, shelter, right? Good timber, cornfields, swamp, creek, cabin with timber, threes. Everything is in threes because it adds diversity. It adds visual appeal. People come there and go, it's not boring. It's not a monoculture one of a cornfield or monoculture of just swamp or just timber. Those are kind of boring. So if you look at my listings, anytime you see the beautiful listings, they always got a lot of diversity. That's key. So those are the 5 things.
Yeah, that's really interesting that 4 of those are all about basically the financial side, the business side, I call it, right? Like, this is accessible. This is a place that's growing, that you could resell this and someone would actually want it or give the most, I guess, reason to do that, right? And only the last one being about something that I would think would go into hunting, right? I think a lot of guys flip those. They're just looking at the hunting aspect of it. And 4 of your 5, 80% have to do with just the business side of it. What would make this good to sell, right? And sell quickly and sell for a high dollar would be my, I guess, interpretation of that. And then even the last one, how set up is it? And this is my interpretation of what you're saying, but how well is it set up already to be good for hunting? And that means I can quickly hunt it, and it's going to be easier for me. I don't have to do so much on the property, but also I can resell it quickly because I don't have to wait 20 years for a bunch of trees to grow or whatever, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that. And again, my methods that I talk about, I've been criticized for this a little bit, Adam, is, you think all you do is think about money. I said, I don't. Actually, when I go out and I'm sitting on my farm, I'm not thinking about money at all. I'm looking at the butterflies and the bees, and I'm watching fawns run through my vitalized seed fields. I'm not thinking about money at all, but I know in the back of my head that I want this is my personal thing, and not everybody's for this, but I want to create wealth, and I want to enjoy it, and I want to shoot the biggest buck of my life. And what's wrong with that? That's right. That's what I do. It's my business. So, if you're not into that, then don't follow me. If you don't like money and you don't want to earn land and hunt your own property and get to 150 acres or 200 or 500, maybe I'm not your guy, and that's fine. Not everybody's into that, but that's what we talk about. And, one thing like, here's a recent story. I had a guy that followed me on my podcast. He's like, I kind of like your approach, and I'm like, okay, well, let me help you find something. And I said, I happen to have a parcel right now that I'm personally interested in. It's 65 acres, and let's go look at it. So why I liked it was an hour and 15 minutes from my home, and I live right outside the Minneapolis metro, so make it an hour 30 minutes from like Minneapolis, St. Paul. So it's in that, sweet spot of around an hour, let's call it. And when I got him there, there's this old house sitting on the property, and it was abandoned. And we walked in, and there was like a raccoon party happening in there, and it was bad. And he's like, man, I'm like, slow down. Let's walk through the land. There's a cornfield up here. We could put some screening on that cornfield because that's next to the road. Then there's this timber that comes through, and then there's this thick grassy area. That was crappy land. It wasn't good tillable. It didn't have good timber. It wasn't beautiful park-like trees. It was like crap trees and grasses and rolling, and it wasn't good at all. But then there was another field over here, and there's a third field in the back, and then all around it there was big chunks of land. And I told him, I said, okay, I want you to open up your mind here and think not what I see, but what I could do with this. That house could be removed, and I'll bet you it can be removed for about $10,000, maybe less. So we get an excavator, you call the local township supervisor, he'll refer you to somebody. And what you'll get is everything from, you can't do that. You can't do that because there's asbestos and there's shingles and there's toxic waste, and you can't do that. And I said, okay, change that can't to how can I do this? And go ask another guy and keep asking until you get the right answer that you're looking for. That's the real answer, because the guy that's telling you, what's his background? He's told you can't do that. Well, why? Like, what do you know? Well, the DNR, they don't like you to do that. I'm like, really? Why don't they like you to do that? So they'd rather have this old blighted house on this road that's fallen down. Right. It's a hazard. It's a fire. Why? And they didn't have an answer. They didn't have an answer. So the long and short of it is, I helped this guy buy this. He came in there. He knocked down that house. It cost him, I think, $11,000 to clean up all the junk piles, which is a key to look for. Look for junk that you could clean up, and you spend a little bit of money. I got crews that will come and do it. And now that house is gone. And then he hired Polk Whitetail Management. It's a group of guys up here in Wisconsin that are my clients, my friends, and they do the work. Plug for them. And they came in and wrote a management plan. And so now they're setting this up. And my client, Chris, I said, this is a 1 to 2 year hold, but you bought it for this level. You put a little bit into it, and we're going to sell for this. And the difference is your profit. Mm-hmm. And so what you can do with that is you roll it over into the next purchase, which is the 1031 exchange. And if I boil it all down, all it is an IRS tax code 1031 that allows you, with the right properties, there's some rules, but to take the money that you got from that sale, roll it over, exchange it into the next property without paying capital gains. You just saved yourself, 15 to 20 some percent that you didn't pay Joe Biden. And you took that equity and you moved up with it. Now you've got a bigger nest egg. Zach's doing it. Chris is doing it. I'm doing it. It's a real thing. And you do that again every couple of years. You move up.
Is that 1031? Does that have a time limit on it? Like you have to let it cool off? Okay.
Yeah. So those are the rules. So you have to identify up to 3 target properties that you're going to purchase. So you close on one property. You've identified in writing 3 properties that you're targeting. When you close, you don't take control of the money. Your money goes to a qualified intermediary. It's a guy you're working with. My guy's Joe Deeker, and Joe holds the money. You go and try to buy one of your 3 target properties, and you have up to 180 days from the time you sold one property to close and buy on the other one. Now, you don't have to wait. Like, I don't have to get an offer, get it under contract, sell it. Now my clock starts, right? You could, before you even sold your property, you could back off and go, okay, I'm going to find my 3 properties. I know I'm going after these, but you have to name them. And Joe will help you with this, but you have to name them in writing. those are your targets. And then you got 180 days to close. So those timelines aren't like this happens, this happens, this happens. They kind of mesh together, but it's a real thing. Eventually, you're going to have to pay the piper if you stop doing those exchanges. But you can, right now at least, you could do those exchanges again and again and again. It's timing. It can be done. You got to work with a guy like me or some other whitetail guy maybe, and we can help you do it. But that's how you move up the chain, and I have multiple guys doing it.
Interesting. In a second, I want to talk about, I guess some of the pitfalls, but just with that real quick, that 1031. So what if somebody stops at like their second property? Is that just when they pay the
piper?
Yeah. And that would be based on the second property or the property you are currently in type thing?
That would be, well, this really gets into a long conversation.
Oh,
We
okay.
don't have time, but yeah, it backs up because you have all this backed up taxes that you eventually got to pay. Okay. But, maybe you're up, I'm picking numbers, maybe you're up to $1 million and you're paying 20% capital gains on $1 million now. Before you started with $100,000. So your nest egg is also a lot bigger. You've utilized the tax code to create that wealth. But there are other things, like there's this gentleman that I've referred a lot of people to. It's called a structured installment annuity. And it's similar to a 1031 where you can 1031 into the structured installment your proceeds from your land sales. You put it over here. And what that does, there's a fixed annuity and there's a variable annuity. It's kind of like an insurance policy in a sense. It's an annuity. The fixed means it's fixed at a percentage, maybe 6, 7, 8%. The variable annuity means it fluctuates a little bit with the market. It can return as much as 10, 11, 12, 15% on your money. What's nice about it is you've 1031'd into it. You didn't pay your capital gains, so you got into the annuity. Now you get mailbox checks every month, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes because you're at 6% or 15%. They grow. And from now until when you die, you're getting ever increasing income. So instead of retiring and being on a fixed income, you're retiring and being on an annually increasing income for the rest of your life. Now, I think the rules are at the end when you die, that's the kicker. It's like your insurance policy that you bought. You don't take it with you. And I don't think you can turn it over to your heirs. It ends. But if people are interested in that strategy, they should look it up. And I think JCR Annuities is the company that I refer to. Give me a call. I'll get you the guy, and he can tell you about it. But that's how you create wealth with land.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot in there for guys to – I think the main theme here is get educated on it, right?
Or find a guy that is.
Yeah, and start working with somebody that is and see if it is actually feasible for you, like we said, to kind of baby step into it, not only for hunting, but also for, again, long-term investment type stuff. So as we kind of wrap up this episode, Neil, can you give us maybe a big takeaway and maybe like I wanted to look at some pitfalls or mistakes people make. Could you? We did cover maybe some of that, but could you give us a big takeaway and maybe a big mistake to make sure to avoid if you're getting into and looking at potentially buying land?
Yeah. Have a plan. The biggest mistake people make is, I've been watching Zillow and I've been calling that agent. I call that agent. I call that agent. And they're like a shotgun all over the place. I'm like, okay, you called a lot of agents and it feels like you're doing a lot, but you're nowhere closer to buying a piece of property because they were all the wrong agent. So slow down, do a little research in your market and find out who the alpha person is in the market that you want to target. So if you want Dunn County, Polk County, Wisconsin, example, St. Croix, that's probably me. And I don't want to pound my chest, but I do this full time. It's what I do. And I'm really, really entrenched in it. There's a lot of people that do or can do what I do. And I'm not even saying I'm better or worse than them. They're all good people. But in every market, there's a guy or a girl that is specialized and is the best. Get that to that person.
Great. Well, good stuff there, Neil. We're going to have you on for part 2. So thanks for joining us here, and we'll see you next time.
All right, buddy. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. If you haven't, start thinking about ways you can make or save money to invest in some land. I know I am, because it's one of those things they can't make any more of, and it will grow in value as you also enjoy using it at the same time. Share any experience you have with us here and for others on our Instagram page, where we can actually and easily interact. I want to hear your thoughts. Okay, next time we continue with Neil on exact manipulations you can do to your land to get its value to really increase and in a short amount of time. You won't want to miss that, and I'll see you then.